Welcome to the Growth Minded Accountant podcast, where our experts will share best practices on running your firm in the digital age. This podcast is brought to you by CountingWorks Pro. Let's get started.
Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Minded Accountant podcast. My name is Lee Reams. I'm the founder and CEO of CountingWorks. And today we're going to kind of evolve what we started last week in our Growth Minded Accountant. We talked about questions that you can ask at the beginning of a tax interview. And today's topic is the one question you can ask at the end of every tax interview. So the idea here is we want to help you open the door to advisory work without selling, feeling uncomfortable, right? Pitching or even slowing down tax season. That's the biggest deal because, if every tax appointment all of a sudden turns into an advisory, you may not even be able to bill for it, and it can start pushing appointments into other appointments. So that is obviously a challenge, and we have some different suggestions and strategies on how to handle that. So as usual, I am joined by Rebekah Barton, our Chief Visibility Officer. Rebekah, if you can say hello.
Hey, everyone.
Right. So I think everyone can relate. There's a moment at the end of every tax interview that most firms rush through, and it's quietly costing you tens of thousands, if not more, dollars per year. And that's not because you can't sell advisory. It's not because clients don't need planning, right? And whether this is CFO advisory or tax planning, it kind of relates. But the idea, what happens is the insight kind of dies at the table, right? There might be some opportunities, some openings, and if you don't follow certain strategies, they may talk about them or glance over them, but then you never really follow up with them. So what happens is it's not a matter of upselling advisory. It's about not letting this opportunity evaporate because you're moving too fast in March. So again, you can't let every appointment turn into an advisory call. Maybe it's not even billable. You have, appointment A runs into appointment B. By the end of the day, you're an hour behind on everyone. You don't want to do that. So I call this the hidden leak in most firms. So during tax season, you're in execution mode, right? You're gathering documents, you're answering questions. Of course, you're managing deadlines, you're managing your appointment schedule, right? And you close most meetings with something like, hey, any questions for me, right? It's polite, it's professional, but what it signals is this transaction, this engagement is complete. This conversation is closed. So even if you had an opportunity with that client, you're almost saying, hey, I'll see you next year. And you're kind of like, I think even they feel it at times when you're very busy that, you're kind of pushing them out the door. And what happens is that is where this growth opportunity leaks. So unless you're using an ongoing marketing campaign, like we said, so we have advisory playbooks that our clients use to help them seed what advisory is all about, whether it be tax advisory, capital advisory, CFO advisory. We kind of seed this year round, and Rebekah's going to kind of talk about why this is so important. But unless you have a full-on autopilot type marketing program, the conversations or the opportunity advisory really are these client touch points and in between. So before we get into kind of how I want you to end the appointment or the interview, Rebekah, I want to get into a little bit more. We talked about this a little bit last week, but I think it's important if we have new audience, kind of why it's so important to have year-round messaging that talks about advisory. The whole point is by the time you even mention it, the client already understands the value that's in it. They've heard it. They've heard this messaging over a period of time, and it makes it much easier for them to jump on, upgrading themselves, really. Self-selecting is the way I say it. So Rebekah, kind of jump in if you can.
Right. So let's just establish that nobody's buying advice in March because you've asked them one question. That's not how it works. Very few people are going to make a major purchase or an upsell because of one single question. That just simply isn't how human psychology works. So what we want you to do is be consistently pushing that messaging in a gentle way throughout the entire year. You want to have consistent messaging that's familiar to people. It becomes trusted. It makes you sound authoritative. And then it becomes your client's normal. So by the time time you're sitting down with them during their tax interview, they've already been kind of preconditioned by having all of these exposures to your advisory services to say, hey, maybe this is something for me. So basically, the more you familiarize people with your advisory services throughout the year at different points, the more likely they are to actually agree to the upsell when March or tax season rolls around. So effectively, you're connecting your year-round marketing strategy to these actual outcomes that you can see during tax season, which is really the entire goal of marketing, right? It's an actionable result that you can see in every interview.
Well, I'm going to argue if you are doing the year round, yes, you can upsell with one question. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So growth-minded accounting firms understand a couple things. The best advisory opportunities don't come from pitching something. They come from listening to your clients, right? And then anchoring what you hear. So clients are constantly revealing advisory signals. And I'll give you a couple examples. Let's say, hey, next year I want to start a business. We're thinking of selling our home and we live in California, we have a couple $1 million gain. We're thinking about hiring, right? I sold some stock. We might sell our rental, right? I'm not sure if this business is structured correctly. My elderly father is going into assisted living. There's all sorts of different things, but they don't label these as advisory. They just say it in passing. So most firms or professionals, they might nod. And I just did my interview with our CPA or my CPA. And basically, I have such a strong background, I kind of drove the conversation, but they didn't kind of use some of these techniques. And it was because, A, I know what I need and I know I need advisory, right? So I already kind of was laying the table for them. But most firms, they just nod. Maybe they'll make a note, but they're really more of, hey, are your documents ready? Is your K1? Are we going to put this business on extension? It was very compliance related questions, right? But if you are listening and taking these mental notes, and if you're using a CRM tool like CountingWorks, you make these little notes, right? Or if you're recording it as a transcript, you can load that transcript into the client context and remember it. And AI tools will be able to help you even create a proposal or even a strategy based on what was talked about. Because during March or February, where we are today, a lot of that insight during your interview, it disappears if you don't note it, right? By the time April 16th passes on, you've kind of forgotten. The clients actually probably moved on. And not because it wasn't valuable insight, it's because it wasn't captured. So let's give an example. You're meeting with a client, Schedule C. Hey, I hired my first employee this year. I'm not sure payroll is set up right now, right? Maybe I wasn't sure. Are they an independent contractor? Are they an actual employee? You acknowledge it. You kind of maybe ask a question, but you really focus on finishing the return. And then in October, all of a sudden they're calling you going, oh my God, I never did anything about this. They're frustrated. They set something out. Worse, they're out of compliance. And you think, oh, we talked about this, but you never built the bridge to make that into an advisory meeting. So kind of another example, a W-2 couple, says, hey, we might sell our rental next year. That's not small talk. That is a serious tax planning opportunity. And because it came up in a tax prep meeting, it probably died in that meeting. Perhaps you were savvy enough to kind of think about this and how are we going to deal with this later or schedule an appointment later. But a lot of times what happens is those signals die. And what we want is our growth-minded accountants not to let those opportunities die. And now we're going to talk about the questions that I would do. So here's the question I would say in the moment. What would you like us to look at more closely after tax season? This is how you're finishing the meeting. So you're kind of done with the compliance meeting and your close is, hey, that's it, right? No pitch. You're not saying, hey, do you think you should be in our tax advisory at $7,500 a year, right? You're not talking pricing. There's no advisory speech. You're just saying, hey, would you like us to look at this more closely after tax season? And why this works. It doesn't feel like there's pressure. It doesn't feel like a sales pitch. It respects the tax appointment. It respects February, March, right? It keeps your meeting moving along and it lets the client kind of choose. It creates an open loop. So this way you're not selling, you're not stewarding. You're just saying, hey, this matters. Let's not lose this. So what happens when they say yes? This is when most firms, I believe, kind of drop the ball or perhaps they don't follow up properly. And I have a three-step suggestion how I would do this. So first thing is I would flag it in my CRM immediately. If you're using CountingWorks Pro and Max, you have a notes section. You include all this in the notes. If you have the transcript in the client hub as a document, that becomes context that Max will be able to proactively look at when we start creating tasks or proposals. So then step two, I would create a to-do list for me, a task that says post advisory, tax advisory follow-up call. It comes up in whatever, after April 15th, let's say after you're back from vacation, May 1, and it says, hey, let's send a structured follow-up email. And that's when you start elevating it from a non-salesy to kind of a post-tax messaging that's a little more aggressive. So as discussed during your tax meeting, we'll send a proposal outlining how we can help you plan for your rental sale. Now your advisory becomes formal. It feels like a product. It feels like a service, right? The expectations are clear. The value is defined. So you'll notice kind of the flow in the meeting, invitation, after tax season, a proposal. And this way you reduce your friction, that sales friction. I would call it that appointment creep in March, right? And you introduce this structure in May. And this is where I think growth-minded accountant firms that start using these strategies really start maturing, and then they get deal flow that's going to come through over and over again. So, hey, I'll give you another example. We might convert to an S corp. That's definitely something worth modeling carefully. Obviously, you need someone like me to look at it. Would you like us to look at that more closely after tax season? They say yes. April ends. You send what I just said. As discussed, we'll send a proposal to model the S corp conversion and walk through projected savings. Now you have a warm advisory engagement. You have client buy-in. And Rebekah, let's say it again. If you've been marketing and continuing your newsletter, including outbound emails, social posts about advisory, how does that warm them up to say yes when it comes to when they actually receive the proposal?
Yeah, we're going to practice what we preach here and keep hammering this home. So yes, the more you say it throughout the year, the more conditioned people are going to be. I think, you're really priming people to understand what your firm is all about. You're priming them to feel comfortable with the services that you're offering, and you're priming them to understand the value of what you're doing without cost being so much of a factor. You're telling them, hey, this is what I'm going to give you, and it's an actionable result. It solves a pain point for them, and you're not just solving it at tax time, you're solving it throughout the year with your marketing campaigns, whether that's newsletters, individual email campaigns, social media posts, whatever it is, or across all of those channels. So it's really important. It is a huge part of upselling people at tax time, is kind of priming them and greasing the wheels a little bit all year long.
Yeah, and it gives them a precondition of the ROI of their investment. So they already see a better benefit by engaging you. So this is kind of like a warm advisory engagement at this point, right? Much easier to sell. You hopefully already have client buy-in because you discussed it, A, at the appointment, B, your marketing material, your communications is talking about it. You have clear scope. If you're using a tool like CountingWorks Pro and our proposal builder, it will show you the engagement. It will show you what the proposal includes. This is what the advisory includes. Obviously, this is new revenue opportunity for you without ever selling. You never feel like a salesperson. You're not cold calling clients. Everything becomes natural, and it becomes systemized throughout the way you run your practice. So I want the mind shift to kind of wrap this up. Transactional firms close meetings. That's the end of the engagement. See you next year, right? Growth-minded firms, they open loops, open communication, open opportunities for advisory. Advisory is not about pushing services. It's about protecting important conversations from being forgotten. So make it so every staff member, everyone who's interviewing kind of follows this system across your entire client database, right? So if you have 350 clients, think about it. And this is a system. So you use what I talked about last week with 3 open-ended questions to start the interview. You use this technique to end the interview. You're using year-round marketing communications. You're not adding pressure anymore. It becomes natural, and it builds a pipeline quietly. And it's a process that is repeatable and scalable. So that's how tax prep becomes advisory infrastructure, okay? And that's what we've been trying to get our clients to do. So stop being a commodity compliance. Don't just sit there in there. Advisory is an opportunity for all of you. I guarantee you, out of your 350 clients, every year you have X number of opportunities. Some might become monthly or annual, quarterly, whatever type of subscriptions, but others might be one-off. But if you can find 20, 30 of those, and there's an extra 2,500 per, you're talking close to $100,000, right? So this is the challenge this tax season. When you hear an advisory signal, don't rush past it. Pause, anchor it, and ask, would you like us to look at that more closely after tax season? Then after April 15th, send the proposal. Hopefully you have the context and you've personalized it so it really refreshes what you guys actually talked about. I'm not expecting you to remember every single comment a client makes, but after tax season, the system drives growth. And that's what I think most of us are looking for right now. So for that point, this one question, that's all you need to do. It helps build the bridge. If you're utilizing systems like playbooks that CountingWorks Pro is offering, that talk about advisory year round, you're already 50% there. So this will wrap up. Again, we wanted to keep these shorter during tax season. This is a quick growth-minded accountant. Hopefully you can utilize this in your next appointment and start building upon this. And again, train your staff, create processes, make it a part of the way you run your practice. I think you'll be much more successful. Until next time, feel free to, again, subscribe, leave comments. We appreciate all the feedback. We just passed 7,500 subscribers on the Growth Minded Accountant YouTube account. So we appreciate every single one of you. So again, I hope you have a wonderful and successful tax season. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.